Hi, welcome back. Okay, so this is lesson number 2. In lesson 1, last week we looked at the musical alphabet, how to plot that on the keyboard and on the guitar fretboard. So if you haven't seen that, go back and watch it before you watch this one. Those of you that have seen it, hopefully you've got a much better understanding, certainly of the keyboard layout, the piano layout, but also of the guitar fretboard. Guitarists, I'm hoping that you also drew out a guitar fretboard diagram and you've been studying that, and it's not going to happen overnight, as I said in the last lesson, but hopefully you've got a much better understanding of at least how to find the notes, even if you haven't memorized them yet. So this week we're going to look at the major scale and how our musical alphabet is used to create a major scale. The first thing we need to do before we actually start looking at major scales, we need to have an understanding of some intervals. There's 3 intervals I want you to remember. There's the semitone, the tone, and the octave. 2 of those we looked at in the last lesson, but let's have a recap anyway. So on the piano, a semitone is essentially the smallest interval we can play on the piano, assuming we're not using pitch bend or anything. It's from whatever note we play to the next available note along. So in this case, I'm going to play C, and the semitone up would be C sharp or D flat, the black note next to it, and then it would go up to D, and so on. Then we have the tone, and that's 2 semitones. So again, from the note C, I'd be playing C up to D, and then from D to E. So we're going to be playing 2 semitones. And then we've got the octave, which is 12 semitones, and ends up on the same note that we started with. So from middle C, an octave would play all the way through to C 1 octave higher. Okay, so they're the 3 intervals we need to remember. The semitone, the tone, which is 2 semitones, and the octave, which is 12 semitones. Now, there's also 3 rules that we want to try and remember for a major scale that I always like to stick by, and that is rule number 1, the major scale must consist of 7 notes. 8 notes if we include the octave, so 7 different notes, and that's the 7 notes in our musical alphabet. A, B, C, D, E, F and G. Some of those notes will be sharpened, some of them would be flattened, depending on what key we're in, but we have to have 7 notes in it. Rule number 2 is it follows the musical alphabetical pattern, and this will dictate when we use which enharmonic note. And we talked a little bit about enharmonic notes in the last lesson, 2 notes which share the same pitch, and I said to you it will all come clear when we start looking at the major scale. So this pattern of making sure we always have the musical alphabet pattern in the scale would dictate when we would use a sharp or when we would use a flat. Talk about just a little bit more about that in just 1 minute. And the third rule is we should always finish on the same note we started on, 1 octave higher. So if we start on C, we need to end up on the note C. If we've gone wrong and we've ended up on a different note, then somewhere you've got to have a re-look at your scale and rethink it. So we've got our 3 intervals, and the tones and semitones, we're going to use a combination of those to create a major scale. And that always follows tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. So let's do that. Let's plot that out. Let's start from the note C, and I'm going to start from middle C on my piano. Now, for middle C, we're going to go 1 tone. That's the first interval, so 2 semitones. So we're going to end up on the note D. From there, we've got to go another tone, and we end up on the note E. Then a semitone, it conveniently fits on the 2 white notes on the piano here. It takes us to the note F. A tone again is G. A tone again is A. A tone again is B. And a semitone to finish, again conveniently where the 2 white notes are, takes us to C, 1 octave higher. So we've started on C and we've ended on C. We've gone through 7 different notes, 8 if we include the octave, and we've got our musical alphabetical pattern, in this instance C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So there's the C major scale. Now let's do the same thing, but let's shift it to the key of A. And this is where we will start to dictate what enharmonic we use in certain notes. So from the note A, and this is the note A just below middle C, we're going to go a tone, and we end up on B. And then a tone here is going to take us to C sharp. And it has to be C sharp because it can't be D flat, because it goes A, B, C. It has to be some form of a C. Then the next note along is going to be a semitone to D. A tone up to E. A tone to F, sharp. Again, this has to be an F sharp, not a G flat, because it has to be some form of an F. And the next note has to be some form of a G, and the tone above F sharp is going to be G sharp. And the semitone to finish will take us to A. Again, the same note we started on. So we followed through our musical alphabetical pattern. Some notes in this instance were sharpened. We've ended on the same note we started on, and there's our major scale in the key of A. So really straightforward. Now on the piano, for every single key, we have to learn a different scale shape. because the notes fit in different places along the keyboard. But on the guitar, although it's a lot more complicated to try and memorise all those notes on the guitar fretboard, once we have them down, we can start to take some scale shapes and shift them around the guitar fretboard, so we can use the same scale shapes in different keys. Let's take a look at that. So first of all, let's have a look at just the whole notes on the guitar fretboard. So let's just open up just the whole notes on here. And now we can see basically all the whole notes on the fretboard without the sharps and flats. And let's bring in the sharps and flats, so they should fill in the gaps. So now we can see every note across the fretboard from the nut, the open strings, to the 12th fret. Hopefully those of you that took the time to draw a fretboard guitar diagram, it should look the same as what's on the screen now, or the notes should be in the same place. If they're not, make an adjustment quickly because you're going to get confused otherwise. Let's wipe the fretboard clean. And let's take a look at the note C. That's the closest to the nut. And that one is the C on the B string, the 1st fret. Now from here, we just follow our tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone pattern along that string. So let's do that. So we start on the note C, a tone up is D, then E, a semitone to F, tone to G, tone to A, tone to B, and a semitone to finish on C. So we've got our C major scale. We finished on the same note we started on, 1 octave higher, and we followed our musical alphabetical pattern. And we've got the 7 notes in there. Again, 8 if we include the octave. Now the thing about guitar is that it can be really great to be able to play scales along one string sometimes, and it's a really helpful technique to have when you get further into it. But it's also not as practical as maybe playing them up and down. So we have these scale shapes that move up and down in one position. So to stop us from having to slide up and down really quickly along one string, we can play the same thing up and down in a certain position. So let's take a look at that. Now I'm going to start on the note C again, and let's open up all the note C's on the guitar fretboard. And I'm going to start on the note C, which is on the 3rd fret on the A string. Now, you could start from any one of those note C's, and we'll have a look at a couple of others in just a minute, but I'm going to start from this one because it's a nice, easy scale shape to start with. Let's plot all the notes. So, first of all, C's. Now let's add the D's in there, and then let's add the note E, and the note F, and the note G, and the note A, and finally the notes B. So we can now see, again as we started with, just all the whole notes, because we know the C major scale only covers the whole notes. And if you take any note C, I'm sure you can probably already see lots of places on that fretboard where you can start plotting out the C major scale. So let's take a look at this one shape. So we start from the note C on the 3rd fret on the A string. Then we go to the open A, then we go to the open D string, sorry. E, F, open G string, A, open B string, and C. Okay, so that's a much more convenient way of playing the same scale shape. And just to show you how these notes overlap on the fretboard, let's take that same note C again, and let's play the same scale, but in a different position. So we start on this note C, and we're going to this time follow up to D on the 5th fret, then E, then F, G, A, B, and C. And let's play that through an octave higher. So we start from that C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. Finally, I want to show you another position which uses all the strings. So we've looked at ones which don't use the low E string so far, start from the 5th string. So let's take the note C which sits on the low E string, and as you can see from looking at all the notes C again, that the best one is, or the only one really, is going to be on the 8th fret on the low E string. So let's play a C major scale through 2 octaves up to the 3rd octave in this position. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Next octave, D, E, F, G, A, B, and the 3rd octave, C. And we could continue along that string through that octave as well if we wanted to. Now, that scale shape we just looked at, I'm going to use that same scale shape, but I'm going to shift it down 3 semitones or 3 frets to the key of A. So we're at C, down to B flat, to A. So we're now on the 5th fret on the low E string, and I'm going to play the exact same scale shape from here, but this time I'm playing an A major scale. And this is what I mean by movable scale shapes. It's a dream on the guitar. So exactly the same scale shape, but let's look at the notes that we end up with now, and we should follow the A major scale. So A, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. Next octave, B, C sharp, D, E, F sharp, G sharp, and A. So the same scale shape, but put into a different position. We're playing a different key. We have to think about these root notes, and if I wanted to move that down again, I'd obviously be starting on the note G, and I'll be playing a G major scale. I could move it up to the 7th fret, and I'll be playing a B major scale. So wherever the root note is, that dictates what key I'm in. So this is where learning the notes along the strings will really help us with this. Okay, so that's the major scale on both the piano and on the guitar, and hopefully that's been helpful. What I would like you to do as a little homework task is to start off by writing the major scale for the key of A, B, C, D, E, F and G. So you can use the same bit of paper if you've got space that you did the fretboard diagram on. Start with all the whole notes, so A, B, C, D, E, F and G, and for every single key, so the key of A, you're going to write tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and follow it along. Then do the same for the key of B, and C, and D, and E, and F, and G, and so on. So you've got all the 7 whole keys there. That will be a really helpful way of being able to start to memorise the notes, and then practicing that and seeing where you can plot those onto the guitar fretboard. Now there are some specific scale shapes that we can use on the guitar which do help us, and there's something which is known as the cage system, which is a way of being able to familiarise ourselves with chord shapes and scale shapes, and we will look at that in a bit of a future lesson. But for now, take a look at the scale shapes we had a look in this lesson, practice those in numerous keys, and just try and remember the notes in the keys and just practice writing them out. Next week's lesson, we're going to be looking at harmonising the major scale. So this is going to be talking about using the notes from the major scale and how we create chords from them, and we get a specific sequence of chords which we can use for songwriting and for, well, many different purposes. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.